So let's move on to our last question, which is kind of related to the stuff you were speaking about in the first part, and that's the changes in the EU lighting regulations. Now, we met 2 years ago. I came to your discussion at a very prolific theatre, let's call it that. And I remember sitting in the audience going, why is there nobody here from smaller spaces? And I just didn't see them. So I then contacted you and said, hey, I can organise a little forum, and I think I can get a good couple of theatres together. Do you want to do it? And that's how we met, isn't it? We did this lovely conversation where independent,
and it was great.
Yeah, independent and smaller theatres were able to ask you directly, what do I do? I've got this light from 1960. Can I use it anymore? You know, that was kind of the thought, thinking behind it. So now, update us. And also, update students if there's anything they need to know, do you think? Because you mentioned that maybe some things have changed, the EU have absorbed some, recommendations. What's the future, say, 3 or 4 years? What do I need to know now?
Yeah,
it's coming down the line.
So the short mini history is the original version of the regulations basically said tungsten light bulbs banned. Then weirdly, it was like LED lighting products of a certain efficiency banned, which would have banned all the LED lights we use because they're not very efficient. By the time you have an optical thing and a lens and all the stuff that we need to shape our lights, it becomes less efficient. The regulations were really badly written about whether they meant the light source or the whole lighting fixture. Yada, yada, yada. So we went through all of that. Fundamentally, what the rule now says is there's a whole bunch of exemptions for theatre lighting. So almost any light you use, first of all, it was never going to ban using lights. It was going to ban buying new ones. So right now, anything you have, you can still use. Anything you have, for the most part, the light bulbs are still legal. Somebody, if they wanted to, could still sell them. The big exception to that is the little M16 light bulbs, which are the ones you see in the downlighters of all the roofs of all the houses and shops and hotels. And we were never, if we're honest, going to win that because they're so prevalent everywhere and they are such high energy users. If you switch all those lights to LED, your energy use falls very quickly. The problem is lots of little theatres have adopted those partly for show lighting because you can just hide them anywhere, but also for things like house lights and work lights and all of that kind of stuff because they were relatively cheap to buy and cheap to run. And that is the thing that's going to have the biggest impact because it's already becoming very hard to buy those light bulbs. And I think even 2 years ago, we said you need to start looking at options to replace that. Interestingly, this has all been sort of going on in the background. The rule got passed. The EU made one change to one bit of wording that messed some stuff up from us. What it messed up was that if you want a very bright spotlight with a white LED source in the back, that wasn't going to be allowed because most LED sources, as they become bigger to get brighter, they become less efficient. And we were going to fail the efficiency test. And we've been going back to them for 2 years saying, the wording you've changed messes us up because what we're going to do now is carry on using the arc discharge light bulbs we've always used because they're exempt for another reason, but they're less efficient. So we need to get this regulation fixed so that we can encourage manufacturers to develop more efficient than the old source, not as efficient as your domestic light bulb, but still better white LED sources. And we won that fight. And that was written into a revised version of the regulation about 2 weeks ago, so middle of November. Right. And we were like, yes, finally, we're finished. It's done. We've fought the good fight. I mean, obviously there'll be another round, but for now we're all good. And then interestingly, because the other thing that we haven't mentioned in the triumvirate of the EU versus COVID is this third thing, which is Brexit, which we've all sort of forgotten about because we've been so distracted this year. And an email appeared from the British government, from the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy saying, oh, right, so this new lighting regulation, we realised because its start date got pushed back to next year, it won't be part of British law when we Brexit. So now we need to do our version of this regulation. And it's all going to be the same thing, and here's the text of it. And we discovered that what they had done is copied and pasted the EU regulation, but the previous version without fix. And they pasted that into a thing, and they write British government rule at the top. And that's the thing they're now proposing. And you're like, oh, God, we've done all this.
Yeah, you're going to have the battle again.
And to be fair, they've been very responsive. Well, we've written to them and said, because it's just, again, it's an accident of timing. You know, if they copied and pasted it a week later, they'd have got the new version. And they're sort of accepting that ultimately they will co-opt the new version, but we still now have to go through this consultation process of saying, this got changed, here's why it got changed, here are the good valid reasons. You know, we need to get it all in sync with Europe, because the thing is, nobody's going to make a special version of anything just for Britain. And hopefully ultimately that will happen, but it's just this thing where you sort of, you know, you need to be on your toes all the time, because otherwise something will flow past and nobody will notice it, and by the time you have noticed, it's too late, because it's a rule. So we're sort of on that. You know, the bigger problem, which again we sort of highlighted at that thing 2 years ago, is even though you're allowed to make a light bulb, are you actually going to make a light bulb? You know, because if you make a very specialist light bulb, and there are only, I don't know the numbers, say 50 theatres in the country that have that kind of light, and they only have 5 of those lights each, and they only buy a new light bulb once a year, it's probably not worth anybody's while making those light bulbs. And so the problem you're going to find is, even though legally you're allowed to sell that light bulb and buy it, there isn't actually one to buy. And so for the same reason, you know, a different driving cause, but the same end result, you need to start going, okay, we need to start a process of upgrading our stuff. You know, we need to start thinking about the future. 2 years ago, that was really hard, because we said, you're going to find this stuff is expensive. You know, it's more expensive than just buying a replacement light bulb. Maybe we can go and try and encourage funding bodies or the Arts Council or somebody to give you subsidies to help with that. Right now, I think the chances of that happening are roughly 0, because the government has spent so much money on everything else. You know, it's interesting though that when you look at this, the sort of the all-hailed £1.5 billion cultural recovery fund, that there were no conditions in that to say, we'll give you this money, it will help you survive, but as part of that, maybe you could start to commit to improving your environmental status. But because it was all done in such a hurry, none of that, I don't think, really happened. So, you know, I think if you're a theatre, the message is, the cheapest option is you need to commit to what you're doing and get some money and go out and stockpile light bulbs now while you still can, particularly if you're older lighting fixtures. But that's not a forever solution. So maybe also you just need to start going, okay, we need to start saving up. And, you know, and that's an incredibly hard thing to say now, because if you can't do a performance to make money, how are you going to save up any money?
Yeah, it's also, I guess, if you don't have an in-house tech, then get a consultant in some way.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, I think the suppliers do a pretty good, the good suppliers do a pretty good job of being honest about it, and giving you the ability to go and try. I think the thing is, you need to, before you commit to anything, you need to go look at lots of products, and you need to read up, because it's easy to be dazzled. You know, it's easy for somebody to take the brightest LED light and turn it on and point it at a white wall and go, that one's brighter than that one, so obviously that one's better. What you need to do is immerse yourself in all the subtleties that you care about. You know, so at the most obvious level, when you fade the light out slowly, does it go
or does
into the magical black, which is what tungsten's always done, or does it go
LED
and then think about it, which is what the cheap LED does? You know, the best of LED is now pretty close to achieving that.
Oh, good. Right.
You know, you need to go in with the weirdest coloured Hawaiian shirt you've ever worn to see what the colour actually looks like. You know, because bad LED does a really good bad job of rendering colour. You know, rendering is one of those words that sounds very technical, but your eye will tell you almost immediately if it looks good or it looks bad. You know, my top advice has always been to go in with a fruit bowl, you know, because fruit under bad LED lighting looks terrible. Fruit under good lighting, however you want to define it, looks natural And
Right.
that's obvious. There isn't really any scientific measurement. You can quantify that. You can go in with a really expensive fancy color meter and you can identify why that's happening. But the short version is going with a Hawaiian shirt and some fruit and go, that light makes it look nice, that light doesn't. Okay, that light costs a bit more than that one, but surely it's worth it. Or not in that, put your hand in the light. Your skin you always have it with you. You always know what it looks like. And it's really telling, because all the subtleties, like all the bits of vein and all the bits where the blood is running through you, bad LED light will make that go really flat. Whereas good light of any kind, you'll feel alive.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the one to try and get the money to buy, I think.
That's really useful. Gosh, yeah, the interview could be longer for sure. I think I'll get you on again, and next time I want you in a Hawaiian shirt holding a fruit bowl. And you can do a masterclass.
Well, ETC, one of the manufacturers, used to use pizza, because pizza is the same thing. It's this mess of colours that terrible.
Yeah.
There's some really fancy restaurants with really bad lighting, and it's really interesting because they bring out this incredibly fancy food, and it just looks like poo almost. But they haven't figured out that the problem is the lighting. And that's, I think I was saying this earlier, lighting it's all powerful, and it's very easy to get a very good, quick sense of what's good and what's bad.
Yeah.
But you just have to trust that. Don't let anybody tell you that the one that's brighter is the better one.
Right,
do that with your hand.
Yeah, no, I think it's I've learned a lot. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your information, and I'll speak to you soon.
Bye.